I did understand that there was a kind of like a sexy scene, as I described it in my testimony, that wanted to be created.
Sharay Hayes, the former stripper known as Punisher, is telling all about his time with Cassie Ventura and Sean Combs during freak-offs.
Do you have any regrets?
And Hayes tells me what it was like to testify in Combs' trial. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Sharay Hayes, the Punisher, took center stage at Sean Combs' sex trafficking trial this week. He used the name Punisher while working as an exotic dancer. And back in 2012, he got a call from a woman who used the name Janet, and that would lead to him being called as a witness in this trial. Janet, Hayes said, was actually Cassie Ventura, and she claimed that her husband had wanted her to hire a dancer for her and her friends for her birthday. Hayes told the jury when he arrived at the Trump Hotel on Central Park West that night, he went to the room and a woman wearing only a bathrobe and a wig was in the bathroom. Hayes said the woman told him that she and her husband wanted him to help them create a sexy scene with baby oil. And there was a lot of baby oil involved, let me tell you. Hayes obliged. Janet, after all, was a beautiful woman. He would tell the jury he didn't know who these people were at first, but months later, he would discover it was Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura. Combs, Hayes said, would direct Ventura in these sexual encounters as Combs watched, sometimes masturbating, appearing with a bottle of lubricant in his hand. As far as Hayes could tell, this appeared to be consensual, but Cassie Ventura had told the jury earlier in the trial that she was open to this activity, the freak-offs, at first, but then later, she felt she had no choice but to participate. Combs is on trial charged with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation for purposes of prostitution. He has pleaded not guilty to all of these charges, and his attorneys have said what went on between him and Cassie Ventura was domestic violence, not sex trafficking, and they say he is not a racketeer. It will be up to the jury to decide whether or not that is true.
So joining me now is Sharay Hayes, the man who was one of the witnesses here in Sean Combs' trial. Thanks so much for joining me, Sharay. First of all, how are you feeling after testifying in this trial that the world is literally watching, not on television, but everybody's following along in this trial and seeing your name?
Well, at this point, I'm definitely relieved from the pressure associated with testifying. It was very nerve-wracking. So much weight, so much is at stake, and kind of being in the middle where my testimony can kind of sway it to either direction. It was a difficult space to be in. But I'm pleased with my testimony in terms of it just being truthful and accurate based on what I could recall. So after it's all done, I'm actually at peace and in a pretty good space.
Take me back to when you first, were in touch with members of the prosecution team, the government. I mean, how did you get in touch with them? Was this after the raid on Sean Combs' properties and, they asked for people who had information to come forward? How did this come about?
Literally, I was just home one day, and this was probably sometime between March and May. I know it was springtime, and I just got a call from my doorman saying, "You have a guest in the lobby." And I showed up, and it was, "Hey, can we talk to you?" And I had no idea what it's for, so I wanted to have the conversation right in the lobby. And they were like, was in reference to Mr. Sean Combs, and I was like, "Yeah, come upstairs." And they just kind of said, "Hey, look, we got your name as far as being a participant in this scenario." And honestly, me personally, I didn't think my testimony or my role in it was significant. I didn't have a full understanding, I guess, from the legal aspect of trafficking and the accusations that they said they were investigating. But I didn't think my participation applied to any of the charges.
Our content really shows how important personal safety is, and that's especially true when it comes to protecting your privacy online. You would be shocked at how much of your personal information is out there, like your address and phone number. Ever wonder why you get so many spam calls and emails? That's because this information is all public. That's where our sponsor, Incogni, comes in. It's a service that helps you take control of your online privacy by removing your personal data from data brokers, huge companies that sell and trade your info without your permission. Incogni found more than 50 plus brokers with my information. And here's the kicker. These data brokers have to remove you from their database if you ask them to. Now you're probably thinking, Angenette, who in the heck has time to contact a data broker? Well, that again is where Incogni comes in. They contact those companies for you to get your online safety back. You don't have to do a thing, and then they alert you after the request has been completed. After signing up, I get virtually no spam now, so I highly recommend giving Incogni a try. Right now, anyone who uses code CrimeFix at incogni.com/crimefix gets 60% off. That's code CrimeFix at incogni.com/crimefix for 60% off an annual Incogni plan.
So this was after March of last year.
Yeah, this was sometime between March and May of last year.
Between March and May of last year. So they got your name somehow, whether it was from Cassie Ventura, the phones, some way, and they come to you and they ask you about all of this. Were these Homeland Security agents, or do you know who they were?
Yeah, it was just a Homeland Security agent, and he was chaperoned by like a regular NYPD officer.
Mm. So you sit down and talk to them. I'm assuming give a statement.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly at the time, I really strongly, I guess in my legal evaluation, thought I was insignificant. So I kind of gave them like a lighthearted recount of what I could remember at the time. And it was similar to my testimony, probably more summarized. I just said, hey, I've seen them about this amount of times. This is how it was. I kind of reenacted the scenario similar to my court testimony. And I really did not expect to hear from them again in regards to that.
So when did you find out that the government indeed wanted you to testify, to take the stand?
Probably just literally a couple of months ago. Everything was kind of presented to me as we're just interviewing tons of people, we're just doing our due diligence. So after hearing from them in May, I think the next time I got any type of interaction was in December. And December was what I was told was still not that I was going to possibly testify. It was at the time where they said they may have been turning over the witness list to the people they spoke to the defense. So they said, hey, we just letting you know we're turning these names over to the defense. So it can put you in a scenario where you're contacted, whatever. And I was like, okay, fine, no problem whatsoever. But then they gave me the option of, did I need help with getting an attorney? And I'm like, getting an attorney? Why would I need an attorney? And that was kind of like the first cue that I may be considered as a witness.
So did you get an attorney?
Yes, I did. So I refused it at that time because I still was in denial, like my testimony, probably won't be significant. And then once we got to about, I want to say April, they reached back out and I was like, oh, wow, this is real. And I asked for help with securing an attorney.
Wow. So let's go back to 2012 now. I mean, we're going back quite a few years. You got the call from the woman who identified herself as Janet. You show up, you said at Trump Tower, you testified to this. The woman then tells you, hey, this is not what I said it was. This is not hanging out with me and my girlfriends for my birthday and putting on a show. And she tells you what's going on. I mean, that you said in your testimony, this is something that this was not part of your normal work routine. I mean, you were somebody who would go to parties and have fun with grandmas and aunts and bachelorette parties. And I mean, this is not your usual game. So what made you kind of agree to take part in this?
Me being as honest as possible, just physical attraction and the initial scenario of it. I mean, Miss Ventura is a gorgeous, gorgeous woman. So, opening the door to a woman as beautiful as her, actually in a role that gives indication that she's nude, I'm like, wow, what's this? And again, me coming in and then what she explained to me she was interested in and the amount of money she gave me initially, it just seemed like a win-win for somebody in my occupation trying to make some extra money on the side.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, $800, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I mean, even now, 13 years later, I mean, that's a lot of money. Um,
Well, well,
and that,
with me initially quoting $200, and
yes.
yeah, it's four times what I asked for, and that's just initial. Literally, nothing happened through the door. It's just here. This is for you. So it was a very tempting scenario in terms of um, that being presented to me the way it was with her beauty and the amount of money. It was like, how do I turn this down?
Yeah, most definitely. So, some time passes and then you figure out finally um, what's going on here or who these people are. You kind of talked about being at the Essex house, and you said you said in your testimony there was usually some downtime,
Yeah.
prep time or whatever. And talk to me about how you realized it was Sean Combs.
Literally, sometimes it'll say, "Hey, show up at 2 a.m.," but they may not be ready to interact for literally a couple of hours. So on this specific occasion, I was put into an extra bedroom in the suite, and to kill time, I figured I'd watch TV, and the hotel happened to have a welcome message. So as I cut on the TV, it just said Essex House would like to welcome Mr. Sean Combs, and it was kind of like a wow. Like I literally had no clue that's who I was interacting with. And this was a period of time after the first time. It might have been as much as a year into these interactions.
Mm.
I honestly felt like a dunce. I followed Mr. Combs on Instagram. I actively checked his page every now and then, and I never put it together.
Wow. When did you discover, like, how long after that did you discover that Cassie Ventura, you said you followed him on social media and you figured out that Cassie Ventura was the woman that you were engaging in these sexual activities with?
That was almost immediately the same scenario with Essex House because she was actively posted and photos with him on his page. And so, like I said, I was spiraling past his page, but I guess I didn't come across any of the ones with them together while I was unaware. So, but it was pretty clear once I saw his name on a TV screen.
So you had between 8 and 12 encounters with them. It was always the same, it sounds like, from what you said, the baby oil. Did that ever strike you as kind of, different? Or, I mean, you described it as you thought this was like a fetish type thing, and that drew an objection. I mean, were you kind of like at first, did you ever like after leaving this, you're like, wow, this is some good money I'm making. This is extra money I'm making. But were you ever like, wow, this is pretty, wild. What's going on here? These people are really into this whole baby oil thing. And the guy kind of saying, okay, move the candle here and do this and do that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a consistent place of discomfort for me. I won't say it was necessarily centered around the details of the baby oil and stuff because I did understand that there was a kind of like a sexy scene, as I described it in my testimony, that wanted to be created. So if that was the visual he liked, I didn't see it completely off. But it was just in general for me, it was outside of my comfort zone in terms of just being in this environment with a woman that's partnered, her partner's watching, and actually actively participating in terms of directing, turn your body this way, move the candle this way. It just wasn't a place of comfort where I could get truly in an intimate space.
Yeah, I would think that would be uncomfortable. You described one interaction in particular where Cassie Ventura seemed a little startled. And you said that Sean Combs threw money down on the bed and she seemed a little bit startled. And he said, like, no, I like this SH, you know what the rest of the word is. What was that like? I mean, that it sounds like that was the only time money ever came from him. You testified she always handled the cash and setting up these transactions.
Exactly. I mean, that situation, obviously, prior to that point, Mr. Combs really kept a distance from our interactions. He would always be literally as much as 10 feet away in a corner, and he would kind of, from like a voyeur scenario. This was one of the few times where he actually was in close proximity. So just my experience, and I guess in terms of with me, even him being close in the area was out of the ordinary. So when I guess he threw the cash on the bed, which was actually in a space of approval, right? He said he was enjoying what he saw. It just was so far out of the ordinary. We both reacted, like startle response, and then she was always had awareness in terms of him and his being attentive to him. She immediately checked in. Hey, are you okay? Is everything is fine? Which he assured that he was. He just was enjoying, I guess, whatever the activity he was viewing.
A big part of the government's case here is that, Cassie Ventura is a victim of sex trafficking, that she was under duress, that she was coerced to take part in this. And so it seemed like on cross-examination, Xavier Donaldson was getting at the fact that you were under the impression that she seemed to, at least in the one interaction you described, she seemed to be enjoying herself. The prosecution kind of asked you that question as well. You never saw violence, you said, never heard any violence when they would leave the rooms after the interactions. Did you ever see anything that caused you concern for her when you entered these rooms for these encounters?
I did not. The circumstances were very routine and methodical. I've rarely seen any of the interactions firsthand between her and Mr. Combs. Like I said, the majority of the time he was across the room. They did have moments where he would leave the room and she would follow him out, but upon returning, things seemed normal as before. So I had no cues that she could possibly be under duress with the circumstances.
And I know that Meredith Foster asked you about, there were times where Cassie Ventura would wince or sigh, I think were the words you used, when
Yes.
Sean Combs would give the instructions. I mean, did the wincing and sighing, could you elaborate on that a little more? I mean, what was your impression of that?
Yeah, so the wincing and sighing was to the specific directions, but my honest assessment of it was some of the directions were very specific. Move this to the right, move this to the left, and they can come repetitively to kind of get the perfect scene, the perfect angle. And I viewed it at that time as just frustration. We're in a sexual and trying to create a sexual connection scene, and then there's these kind of minuscule instructions to do it a specific way. So I saw it as frustration. Again, that's in the moment. In hindsight, I'm sure that there could have been a possibility that the distress was, or what I viewed could have came from a different motivation or a different experience that she was having, but I did not read it that way in the moment.
Mm-hmm. It did seem like in your testimony, and I'm not going to use the language Sean Combs used, he was very graphic, but from what you recounted, that he was the guy in charge. I mean, he was saying to you at one point, he, I guess, threw some condoms on the couch. And then he said, now I want you to, do this. So he was the guy, did it feel like at the time in your recollection that he was running the show?
Based on how I viewed it, and I stayed. When I first got there, my very first encounter, it was explained to me that this was a scene or a sexual fantasy that was trying to be created. So I always, in all my experiences, understood that I was to participate with Miss Ventura to create this scene. So I knew it was for his pleasure in terms of it being aggressive or any energy outside of consensual between him and his partner. I did not get a read on that.
So you did not feel he was aggressive?
I did not. It was, even in that moment, it was more assertive. And it was assertive. It was him asking for what he wanted, but not an aggression that I thought could be fearful or to create fear.
And it sounded like you and Cassie Ventura, you guys would like engage in chit chat. It was like, oh, hey, good to see you again. How's work? Da 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 da. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a pleasant, personable exchange every time I showed up. She would obviously remember my work situation, ask me about work, ask me how things are going. We'd have a small conversation. So it was very cordial and natural.
So Sean Combs, you walk into the courtroom to testify. He's a powerful guy. Still, in his situation that he's in now, he's a powerful man. When you walk in, you put your hand up and swear to tell the truth, and you sit down in that chair, did you look at him at all? Did you make any eye contact with him?
Honestly, I was doing the opposite. I was trying to avoid it. What I wanted to do coming in there, I understand his position, very powerful person. There is a scenario where they say they didn't give him bail because of the possibility of him maybe intimidating people and stuff. So, of course, that was a concern or a worry that I considered. But at the same time, I'm compelled to tell the truth, right? I have to tell the truth. I have to give my recount of what I remember. And what I just wanted to do was do it in a fair, with no bias, and just give the circumstances that I was a part of. And I think it was kind of comforting, if I'm being honest with him myself, knowing that I did not see any abuse, any aggressive behavior or anything that I can really align with and testify. I was hoping that just that truth would be honored and just as a place of integrity, and he didn't view it as a personal attack or a discredit in any way to anybody involved.
You testified that these encounters ended, and this is something you've spoken openly about. You wrote a book about it, that you had trouble performing, that there was some anxiety surrounding that, and that you had some issues, with erectile dysfunction. So let's touch on first how, the encounters ended. You said they didn't call you again because there was a time where you couldn't kind of complete the job.
Yeah, well, that's my assumption. That's not confirmed by them, but
sure.
Specifically the last time we interacted, that was the similar situation with the throwing of the condoms. So there was a direct desire to see penetrative sex. And I guess it being out of the norm, him asking, directly, I got some anxiety and I could not perform. And that was coupled with the fact that it had been quite a few months since I had been called by them. And during that time, I had like an injury to my arm. I couldn't work out. So I also felt like maybe I didn't show up in the similar physical condition, at my best. So these were interpretations that I created that, hey, this could possibly be the last time maybe I'm getting fired per se. And it ended up being accurate. So it was, I guess, a good prediction.
And you wrote a book about this. You called it Freezer Meat. So talk to me about why you decided to write a book about it. And it obviously came up because you wrote about this couple, this married couple, in your book without naming them. You wrote it in 2022. But why did you write the book?
Yeah, so the full name is In Search of Freezer Meat. And when I was going through I went through a tough time, to a bad breakup where I became completely incapable of having sex. I could not get an erection for almost a year. And I went to multiple doctors and stuff to try to find out what was going on. And I found out it was not anything wrong with me physically. And it was all a mental scenario. We're further looking into it. 50% of cases of ED are all mental. Men are physically fine, and it comes from anxiety. So the reason why I spoke about their story specifically was that circumstance specifically made me unable to use erection pills at all. Prior to the situation, I could pop a Cialis and be fine, but there was so much pressure. My way of performing was, if one pill didn't work, then I would take two. Then I would take three. And I was really taking some absurd amounts of pills, thinking more medication was going to correct the situation. And I realized that if you have anxiety, it creates a hormone, cortisol, restricts your blood vessels. And I don't care how many pills you take, it's not going to work. So I referenced their story, not for the details of their story. I used it as a circumstance where I tell a story about my life, the effects of it, and it gives some sort of medical understanding to why other people could be having a problem. So that's really the basis of my book. It's a bunch of personal stories that are connected to medical causes, issues, solutions that have to do with men struggling with erectile dysfunction, and more so psychologically, that there's just, millions of men trying to fix a mental problem with a physical remedy. Everybody's popping pills, testosterone boosters, and these things, and very well it may just be shame and a confidence issue that could actually be a problem. And then,
Yeah, it
and in
might
my
be
case,
up here.
up here, and in my case, I did the extreme because to correct my mental issue, I went as far as getting a penis implant, which I don't regret, but that's for 70-year-old men. I'm getting an implant at 47 years old because I was so far gone from the anxiety or whatever. I could not function. And, I'm happy with my decision, but I realized that it's a real low place. You feel emasculated. You feel a shell of yourself. As I told my story, it's like every other guy I spoke to in my age range was having a similar experience. So I just wanted to create a tool that I could have used myself going through this issue that maybe men can read, identify, relate, and get motivated to fix whatever issue they may be going through. Because it's affecting men personally, it's affecting marriages. We all know a married couple that sleep in a separate room and they haven't had sex in 2 years. These things are way too common in our society. So I was just trying to make a self-help book and help men out. And obviously that story, the details of it contributed to giving a cause and effect of anxiety.
Just finally, the cross-examination, how did you feel? I'm reading a transcript. So when you're up there and you're being questioned by Xavier Donaldson, and he starts off by, congratulating you on your book. Did you think he was being snarky, or how did you feel he was, how did you take that?
Believe it or not, the opposite. I would, when you're preparing for cross-examination, you think somebody's going to try to rip you apart. I'm expecting aggression. I'm expecting to try to make me seem incredible, right? To take away my credibility. And I know you can't get the energy reading it, but it actually seems sincere. He actually said something similar in closing. He said, "Mr.
Yes.
Hayes, I wish you the best. I wish you the best with your book." And I think what I felt from his from his cross-examination and dealing with me, I'm being honest. Like, he has all the notes. He has the notes. He knows everything that I said for months. And I stuck to my consistency of my truth, my recollection. I didn't deviate that in a way, at least I felt, that was biased to either side. And I think that's why I didn't get the venomous attack that you would expect in this type of trial.
Yeah, and he tried to imply that you had feelings for Cassie Ventura, and you kind of quickly corrected him and said that's not correct.
Yeah, I think we kind of cleared it up as testimony went on. I think what the misconception was I did feel special. My understanding, I believed what I was told in the beginning. So I believed they were a married couple, even when I found out who they were. But I thought this was a nuanced thing. Like, them hiring me, I thought I was the only guy. And I thought, listen, out of all the men that she could have do this and they can have this experience with, I'm the guy. And this is really what I thought. So I guess it got confused with me feeling special about being the person chosen collectively by her and also by Mr. Combs, that was romantic feelings that I had for her. And that was not the case. That's why that's why I said in testimony, I believe that's out of context.
And, what's it like now to see your name all over the place? And it obviously your legal name is not the name you see in the headlines, but we see Punisher, in all the headlines. Has this been pretty surreal?
Yeah, it's way more than I could have ever imagined. And I have not really processed the meaning of it yet because it's
Yeah.
difficult. We're not exactly in a, if everybody was like you, where you're going to assess it based on the facts, you're going to get the testimony, you're going to see everything, then this would be easier. But this is a place where ideology rules. Somebody can have a strong opinion and that strong opinion becomes fact. So in a scenario, I've been a male stripper for 30 years. And in this testimony, I might as well have been a male escort for 30 years. So it's just really how it plays out in the big picture of how I'm viewed. And I'm still assessing that and processing that. A lot of negative feedback, a small portion of positive, but, it goes with the territory. I didn't really have a choice and I just have to manage it the best I can.
Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts is I'm grateful for the opportunity to present myself in a way different than just the Punisher, the male escort / stripper, because that just pigeonholes you into kind of a perspective. So I appreciate you offering this platform where I can present myself in a way where maybe people can see a different light and have a different opinion of me, even though my unfortunate participation in that trial.
Do you have any regrets about ultimately saying yes to that first, the sexy scene, or what Sean Combs calls a freak off?
It's funny you say that. Literally, at that point, I was 40 years old and I barely did house parties. So if I got calls for them, I would refer them out to other guys. And I was texting them. I was putting the information in to send to another guy to do the party. And once I heard Trump Tower, I was like, oh, wow, it's a fancy hotel. Maybe they'll tip a lot. I kept it. I was this close to not even being involved. So, yeah, there's some regret. I'm going to manage this the best way I can, but the best possibility would have been to not be involved at all. And the biggest regret is I know it's the allegations and there's no actual verdict in the case. But if this was a scenario where Miss Ventura was under distress and forced to do these type of acts, it's something I feel terrible about, even unknowingly participating in any regard. That's something that sticks with me a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure. Sharay Hayes, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.